Two teen girls go for a walk one winter afternoon along the train tracks, unaware someone is stalking them. When they don't return home, both families know something is wrong. The case explodes and a video goes viral showing the final moments from one of the girls' phones. This is the Delphi murders, and I have two guests and new information you are not going to want to miss. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 25 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. Most small towns across the country have an iconic, spooky landmark. A curvy road said to be suicide highway, maybe a trail where strange things have happened, maybe a house kids refuse to walk by. Stephen King seized on this nostalgic part of childhood in many of his horror novels, making the everyday life of being a child a haunting, memorable experience. The Monon High Bridge in Delphi, Indiana, is one of those places. Delphi being a town of just 3,000 people. Class pictures are snapped along the bridge. Wedding photos are taken. Lots and lots of selfies and social media videos. This bridge was built in 1891, and at just over 60 feet high, it is the second tallest bridge in the state. Used as a train passage up until 1987, the abandoned wooden railroad bridge is also one of those places in Delphi town kids dare one another to cross.
Delphi has this old rail system that was then converted into trails. So it's sort of a relic of the golden age of rail back in the day when everything was trains. But you know, in Indiana, that's been largely supplanted by cars and trucks and whatnot. So you still have these railroad tracks. The town has to decide, what are we doing with these? And they decide, let's make trails. And one notable feature of the trails in Delphi is over Deer Creek, which has very steep slopes. There's a massive train trestle bridge called the Monon High Bridge. And it's abandoned. It's no longer used by trains. I think if you put a train over that, it would collapse at this point. It's very rickety and scary. And that is something that a lot of the local kids like to cross as sort of a rite of passage to show how brave they are.
13-year-old Abigail Williams, known as Abby, and 14-year-old Libby German are among those Delphi teens who want to be able to claim their badge of honor in town as being unafraid to cross the Monon Bridge. The bridge, incidentally, is connected by way of the Delphi Historic Trail. It's February 2017, cold in Indiana, desolate. The trees are bare. Any foliage, save for evergreens, is a drabby gray and brown color. On the afternoon of February 13th, with most reports putting the time at 2 p.m., Abby and Libby are dropped off near the bridge by a family member. They want to walk the trail, maybe even try to pass over the bridge, which is an intimidating sight for anybody who is not a fan of heights. In addition, the bridge is not in the best shape and is considered by Indiana landmarks to be one of 10 most endangered structures in the state. So one might pass over it at their own risk, which makes this particular teenage rite of passage all that much more enticing. Not long after they get out of the vehicle near the trail, Libby posts a Snapchat photo of the bridge. Its amazing architecture and the sheer immensity of the structure is hard to overlook. We've all seen these bridges in films. Surrounding the bridge are hills, steep slopes, and woods, the beauty of Indiana nature. The water running under the bridge is Deer Creek, which is muddy and murky. kind of the color of creamed coffee.
Liberty, who was called Libby, German, and then Abigail, who was called Abby Williams, are two really good friends. They are growing up together in Delphi, Indiana, which is a pretty small city in a very rural county in Indiana, Carroll County. It's, in between Indianapolis and Chicago, but, think farmland, forests, and they're good friends. They're in middle school. They're doing all these activities together. They're in a number of sports together. They're in band together, and they're just really good kids. We've talked to people who knew them, and in school, when you'd be calling for Abby, you'd get Libby with her, or vice versa. They're just pretty inseparable. They're part of a friend group, and they're doing all the normal things that teenage girls do. I mean, they're very young. We want to emphasize that. Libby is only 14. Abby is 13. So they're kind of just getting started in life, but they're already having a huge impact on people. Just really sweet girls. Libby's a little bit more outspoken than Abby. Abby's a little shyer, but Libby kind of brings out maybe more outspokenness in Abby, and Abby brings out a thoughtfulness in Libby's. Good friends, good girls. They both play saxophone. And Libby is actually quite the athlete. She's in swimming. She's in volleyball. One thing they were going to do together was Abby had just signed up for softball so she could play on Libby's team. So they're active. And I would say that, what they like to do after school, though, I mean, they're both very close to their families. Abby is the only daughter of a single mom, and they're exceptionally close. And she's also close with her grandparents. Her grandmother remembers, baking cookies with her and sort of hanging out with her, and just, they're very much in with their families. And then Libby, of course, she's got a number of siblings. She's living with her grandparents locally. They're very close. And Libby's the kid in the family who just is wise beyond her years. She's really thoughtful in how she just deals with relationships and, trying to make other people feel good, feel welcome. So, I mean, they spend a lot of time with their families and then going to sleepovers, hanging out with each other.
That voice is journalist Aine Cain. Along with her husband, Kevin Greenlee, an attorney, they created and host the Murder Sheet podcast. They are probably the best source for accurate information about this case. Having covered it from day one on their podcast, dedicating scores of episodes to it, both sat through the trial for the man later accused and have written a book about the case, which is due out this week. Shadow of the Bridge, the Delphi Murders and the Dark Side of the American Heartland. If you want to read more about the book, I'll post a link in the show notes. The book, I will say, is a solid piece of journalism and the best source for this case. What I like about their coverage is the honesty, integrity, objectivity, and perhaps most, the on-the-ground level of reporting they have done, pushing aside all the bullshit and social media nonsense to get at the facts and tell the true story. So although I'd love to give you a rant about social media trolls trying to hijack yet another very high-profile murder case, I'll spare you this time. Because Aine and Kevin are full of information and facts about what really happened here, leaving no question about the integrity of the actual evidence and what took place near that iconic bridge on that February day. I had a long conversation with them both about this case recently. And what struck me was their focus on facts and the victims, Abby and Libby. Aine and Kevin care about both very much. And in true crime, we are forced today, more than at any other time in the history of the genre, to make sure the information we are receiving is from a reliable source. On February 13th, 2017, tell me what happened.
So the night before, Abby had a sleepover with Libby at Libby's grandparents' house. They had the day, that Monday, off from school because there are a dearth of snow days, and the district gave that school the day off just sort of as a fluke. So they have all Monday to hang out. They kind of stayed up late at the sleepover, had fun, posted things on social media, had pizza, watched scary movies, just very typical. And they decided, we're going to possibly go out shopping with Libby's grandmother, who says, if you help me sort some of my work, then I'll give you some money and we can all go shopping together. But then the girls changed their minds. They asked to be dropped off at the trails, basically this trail system we talked about earlier, which is, forested, very beautiful. And, they want to walk on the trails. Pretty innocuous. So Libby's grandmother says, well, if you can get rides to and from, you can do that. I really want to emphasize how safe Delphi is. There's crime there like everywhere else. There's drug crime like in rural areas across Indiana. It's not atypical, but it's a very safe place. So she says, okay. They get dropped off at the trails by Libby's older sister, Kelsey, and they're going to be picked up by her father, Derek German, on the way back. So he's out doing work in an adjacent community, in a community a couple minutes away, but he's like, when I'm coming back home, I'll swing by and pick you up. So all very normal. They're in communication. Libby's a responsible kid. She's going to keep her family informed about where she and her friend are. So no one's worried about this. The girls talk, we know, because witnesses saw them. They're sort of talking together and hiking the trail, and they're going towards the Monon High Bridge. This is one detail that Libby did not tell her grandmother. They intend to cross the Monon High Bridge, which is a scary bridge, but it's something a lot of teenagers do. And, they post the pictures. So the girls get on the bridge to do this crossing together. Libby's crossed it before. Abby's never crossed it before.
One thing Anya mentions there is the time, 1:38 p.m. on that day. And this is what I mean. Most sources round that up to 2 p.m., which is just factually incorrect. And a 22-minute differential in a missing person or murder investigation can make all the difference in finding the kids and the perpetrator. Time is of the essence. And in this case, we have an exact timeline from the beginning because of cell phone data and Libby actually communicating with people, messaging them, and posting pictures on social media. And then there is this now iconic video from one of the girls' phones. A video which went viral and caused so much speculation, non-essential opinion, and disinformation to spread later on. On the video, there is a haunting image, and even more alarming than that, one particular chilling sound from the video, which we will get to in a little bit.
This is, they arrived there at, I believe, 1:38 p.m. And the next pinpoint where I'll leave it to Kevin to explain is about, we're kind of getting past 2, going towards 2:13 when this incident unfolds. But, as they're going, Libby's actually in communication. She's messaging people. She posts a picture or two. So she's kind of documenting this in the typical teenage way of kind of being on her phone and, showing everyone what they're doing.
So at 2:13, for reasons we can never know, Libby decides to start videotaping on her phone her friend Abby is walking across the bridge. And just behind Abby, there is a man following her, kind of with his head down a bit and kind of looking vaguely menacing. And Abby is clearly uncomfortable in this video. She's clearly nervous. And she gets across the bridge, and Libby makes a comment to her indicating that the man following them has a gun. And then almost immediately after that, the man says to them, "Guys, down the hill." And then the video ends.
You can hear the clicking of what we believe is a gun where he's racking it. It's pretty distinctive. And the girls sound very scared. They have high-pitched voices. They're breathing hard. They seem to be, it makes me want to cry. A lot of women, and even some men, I'm sure, have had the experience where you're around a person that's really creeping you out and you're almost trying to sound normal because you're praying that if you act normal, nothing's going to go down. They're just going to move along. And so hearing the fear, the fear in their voices is palpable, in my opinion.
Let's just play that video, and I'll turn up the volume so you can hear exactly what's happening.
See, this is the path that we go down. There's no path going there, so we have to go down here. Hi.
This video, which a lot of you have seen, I'm sure, has this Blair Witch vibe to it. And what makes the hair stand up on your skin is the image of the bridge guy walking behind the kids as they shoot the video. And you can clearly hear, as Aine says, that fear, how scared the two girls are. Let's take our first break here. When we come back, we'll get into the search for the girls and a part of this case most have not heard before. A fact that kind of blows a lot of rhetoric, foolish conspiracy theory drivel, and social media made-up nonsense to bits. More Crossing the Line in 1 minute. So now they obviously turn up missing, right? So they don't come home. And who is the first one to notice this?
First one to notice them missing is Derek German, Libby's dad. They have a close relationship and he's supposed to pick her up. So he goes to the trails fully expecting Libby and Abby to be there so he can pick them up and take them home. Just a normal routine event. He texts and he calls and no one's picking up. And that's really abnormal. There are certain teenagers where that would not be abnormal, right? You know, like some kids are just not, they might space out or they might be doing something. But Libby is a diligent kid. She's a respectful kid. She's going to be the one to pick up and say, okay, here we are. And that's not happening. So Derek becomes concerned, but it's not immediately like a 5-alarm fire situation. He's thinking probably things like, well, maybe their phone died or like they got lost track of time. So he's trying to go look through the trails. He's asking people on the trails, have you seen two girls? There's other people at this point who have kind of arrived after the girls sort of were abducted and are walking and they're saying, we didn't see anything. So he's just going through this and eventually he realizes, I can't find them. This is pretty serious. He calls his family. They come. They start looking. And at a certain point, pretty early on, they call law enforcement, maybe around, I think, a little bit after 5 p.m. because they're realizing, okay, this isn't our teenager and her friend acting uncharacteristically strange and kind of being not diligent about their phones. This is something more serious, and they're very concerned. But I want to note the immediate thought is not somebody did something to them. It's they may have wandered from the path and somebody got hurt and the other girl's not leaving her and the phone is dead. They're thinking accident, not murder.
Maybe the kids wandered off into the woods and are now lost, which is tragic and scary for any family. But in today's day and age of technology, I think it's a safe bet that if they are lost or in trouble, the kids will be found. The last thing anyone is thinking at this stage is an abduction or murder. A town of 3,000, as I said, where literally everyone is aware of one another. If there was someone in town to worry about, most would know who he is. Yet, that thought does not appease the fear of some psychopath passing through and deciding to grab two teenage girls. Then again, if they both have cell phones, why haven't they called for help or answered a text or call? The one possibility those searching for the kids, as well as their families, begin to think is that there are very steep slopes leading down into the creek. So there is a chance the girls could have lost their bearings, a bit frazzled after losing their way, and fell down the slope, breaking an ankle or even sustaining a concussion and losing their phones in the process.
Law enforcement comes in, and again, for the most part, they have the same assumption. This is an accident. This is search and rescue. We're not trying to find bodies. We're trying to find two lost little girls, and one of them may be injured. And then as time goes on, the thought morphs into they may have died in an accident. They may have fallen in the water, which is shallow, but if it was from a height, they might have, there might be a death, but it's not nefarious. But what happens is local fire gets involved, local sheriff's department, which is the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, they get involved. Sheriff Tobe Lesenby is on the scene. Fire chief is on the scene. Department of Natural Resources officers are helping. So the first night, it's them and it's civilian volunteers, and they're looking diligently. They're going around town too. It's really out of character for Libby and Abby to be missing like this, but just in case this is like some, random rebellion, they go to the basketball game that's happening locally. They go to like all these different places just to see if they ran off with a friend or something. And that's where everyone's looking. And the search is, I believe, officially called off around midnight.
Yeah, that's largely for liability reasons. You can't have people out all night searching because what if something happens to them in the dark? But even though the search is officially called off, there's still people out there all night searching for these girls desperately, and they don't have any luck. When the sun comes up next day, the full search is resumed. And this is something that I think highlights something about Delphi. Employers were calling their employees and saying, if you want, you can take the day off and you can go and you can help look for these girls, which I thought was a remarkable thing.
Yeah, this is a community where people are helping each other. And I think I try to remember that when I think about some of the inhumane acts that people have done since. But like Delphi gives me hope for humanity because it's like we're dropping everything and helping our neighbors.
As Aine says, that kind of community outreach and, honestly, collective empathy displays the true temperament of Delphi residents. Nothing matters more than finding these girls. Everything else can be put on hold until they are safely back home. But as the noon hour approaches on that next day, and those volunteers, law enforcement, and others are out searching, the worst possible news imaginable emerges.
There are a number of different search parties out. They all kind of get their assignments. They all like break off into groups, small groups. And what we have, the situation that we have uncovered from sitting through trial and authoring the book, is you have multiple search parties sort of slowly converging on the same area where the girls' bodies are. The people who make it there first are a gentleman named Pat Brown, who's one of the searchers, and they just are walking. And, we've actually been out there, so they don't see them right away. They're walking towards the creek, and what you have to understand is there's almost a shallow indentation in the ground. So you can be sort of walking towards something and you're not necessarily seeing everything in that shallow indentation. It's just a natural formation. So they're walking there, and what happens is a number of searchers on the other side are seeing articles of clothing in the creek, and they're saying, we're seeing something. A firefighter's coming to look at this. They're sort of seeing Libby's tie-dyed shirt and shoes, and so it's becoming very concerning. But the people who find the bodies are the people with Brown's group, and he just comes upon them, and he thinks they're mannequins at first. It's an unusual scene, and what they find is that Liberty is nude, and Abby is dressed in a number of Libby's items of clothing, indicating that she also was undressed at some point and then was forced to put on Libby's clothes or put on Libby's clothes for whatever reason.
This is an odd detail about this crime scene. Why would their killer do this? First thought is, obviously, there's a sexual element to this crime. And this changing of the clothes is some sort of ritual within that twisted fantasy of the perpetrator. I think I have said this before on the show, but it bears repeating here. These guys are driven by their fantasies, whatever they are. Those fantasies make them feel comfortable and in total control, which are two of the driving factors as well, motivating men to commit these despicable acts. There's also another element within this crime scene which will become important later on.
There's a number of small, I would say like branches over them, as if someone was trying to sort of conceal the bodies, largely from the other side of the creek. That like the angle would almost obscure them from that side of the creek, although when you're on top of them, it doesn't obscure them.
And how far would this be from where the video was taken?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know in terms of like meters or anything like that. It's not too far away. It's like you basically the path that you can imagine is they're forced. They're on the one side of the bridge. They're forced down this hill. They cross the creek, and then they're in this clearing. So it's not too far.
One of the most incriminating and important pieces of the eventual prosecution's puzzle is found at the crime scene. And this is a piece of evidence, I think, those who want to later claim the man behind the murders was, no pun intended, railroaded and set up. I think they overlook this. Or, what's worse, choose to disregard it. And yet, when you come into a case like this without any bias, not knowing too much about it, and you start to look objectively at the evidence, this one small item found at the crime scene becomes almost like a smoking gun. So, the worst possible case scenario is discovered. I mean, what happens from there? Obviously, we know the family is distraught. What kind of news comes out about this, like, right away? What are people hearing?
Well, one thing that I think is worth stressing is that there was something found at the crime scene that was kept secret. And that was the fact that there was a cartridge or a shell that had been cycled through a gun and not fired. And that was found between the two bodies.
So this one projectile was loaded, but then ejected, likely unknowingly, from the weapon, which would be enough to give it a signature from that particular gun. And despite what ballistics naysayers of today will spew, ballistics is a science, one that involves physics, material study, and chemistry. It's not just some dude wearing a white lab coat staring into a microscope making comparisons. Is it a fingerprint, however, as most experts have always testified? About as close as you can get, proven time and again in court when talking firearm evidence.
The police very much did not want that piece of information coming out because the thinking was that if the killer realized that he had left a bullet there, he would get rid of whatever gun it had been cycled through and they would never find him. And so because of them wanting to keep that secret, the whole crime scene was shrouded in secrecy. And that inspired a lot of rumors and conspiracy theories that persisted for years. So when the news first started coming out that the girls had been found, there were no details about how they had been killed or no details about the homicide, only that they had been deceased.
And you have to understand, the news media is already there because they're covering this story of the lost girls. So they're planted there, waiting for this outcome. And basically police are not saying much about what happened. So it really fans the flames of interest, understandably, from the public.
Law enforcement has this piece of evidence only they know about. The thought is, the girl's killer did not even know he'd left the projectile at the scene. Otherwise, he would have taken it with him for sure. The idea is, when you ultimately bring in a suspect, if that suspect has a weapon, you can run ballistics to see if the gun and projectile are from the same weapon. Find the gun, find your killer, in other words. And how are they killed?
Their throats are cut.
Okay. And so no details about the crime scene come out, obviously. And there's a murderer on the loose. I mean, a vicious murder. And is it said right away if they are raped or they are not raped? Is that given out?
They do not say. And I think, that was, again, part of the secrecy. But in fact, they were not. There's no, well, I should say this. There was no evidence that they were sexually assaulted. As far as we all know that police try to be careful about the language with that because, but there's no DNA in the sense that would indicate that happened. Obviously, the fact that both of them were naked at some point indicates a level of sexual motivation potentially, but something can be a sexually motivated crime without involving sexual assault.
Especially when a knife is involved. A knife is often described by psychiatrists as a surrogate penis, right? So it looks like that might be the case here. So there were no bodily fluids from a male found at the scene.
No, and I will say this, though. Early on, there was believed to be DNA from a possible perpetrator, although that ultimately fell apart. But it was, and I think in the beginning, law enforcement thought, okay, we might have something here. We might be able to piece together this with DNA, and didn't happen.
As it turns out, if you look objectively at the evidence they do wind up collecting, DNA was not needed to resolve this case. DNA is kind of a go-to now with the public. That old CSI effect we see in every courtroom. Is there DNA? If not, well, how do we know for certain this person committed the crime? The fact of the matter is, DNA has only been used in crime solving for the past 40 years. And scores of murder cases have been solved and successfully prosecuted without DNA long before that. So, you do not need DNA to solve murders. That is a fallacy. It helps, obviously, but most investigative teams still rely on the old school method of gumshoe and crime scene work, questioning suspects, confessions, and putting together a cohesive narrative based on strong circumstantial evidence. Almost from the moment the girls went missing, this becomes one of those cases. You know what I'm talking about. The media, the online circus, social media madness, all of it begins and continues to build and gain momentum. Two young teens out for a stroll wind up nude and murdered, their throats slit. Although there is no sexual assault, the public doesn't know this right away, and the case takes on a viral status. It's everywhere. And this is all before that video is ever released or the public even knows it exists. The public, and rightly so, is demanding law enforcement put a face to the monster responsible for this horrific crime. Bring this animal in and string him up in the public square. And I will add this. I would certainly be there, just to be clear, holding one of those torches. Be right back with more of my conversation with Aine and Kevin from the Murder Sheet podcast about the Delphi murders in one moment. All right, so the investigation begins. There's a whole kind of social media conspiracy, everybody's a crime expert type of thing going on. And that kind of just fans the flames of what could have happened, who did it, et cetera, et cetera. It looks like police release a sketch of a potential suspect. And where is that sketch derived from? Do they say?
Yes. And so actually, initially, they release so they find Liberty's phone underneath Abigail. That's a crucial clue because now they have the video of Bridge Guy as he became known.
And just to add here, again, there's no way their killer would have left that phone at the scene if he had known. Which says what? This guy is sloppy. He's unorganized. He is unlikely to be a serial predator or serial killer. More so, he falls in line if we're talking profiling with a local. A guy who has fantasized about this type of crime for years and has finally acted out.
So they release first an image of Bridge Guy sort of saying, we just want to talk to this guy because he might be a witness. But they know, like, this guy was abducting the girls. That actually does initiate a pretty crucial tip, I think. But going to the sketch, yes, that came from a woman named Sarah Carbaugh, who was a witness. She was driving along a local road nearby, and she sees something really striking. She sees on the side of the road a man walking along. He's covered in blood and mud. And she thinks this guy probably fell down one of these kind of slopes in the trail area. And, he seems like he doesn't, he's kind of shrinking away and sort of looking down. He seems like he doesn't want to be seen. She's creeped out by it and she drives on. And when she hears about the homicide, she doesn't immediately come forward. She's very freaked out about the whole thing. But she ultimately does come forward to police. When they kind of talk to her, she says, this is what I saw. And she kind of describes a scruffy looking middle-aged guy wearing a hat.
And then from there, the investigation kind of goes underground. What are they finding? What are they focused on that the public doesn't know at this time?
Yeah, that's a great question. They're going in so many different directions. Essentially, what you have is law enforcement agencies working together. Indiana State Police is heavily involved at this point. They came in on the day of the search, the second day, February 14th, and they are very much working it. It's still Carroll County's case, though. The FBI is involved. And what you have is all of these people coming in from different agencies to help out. And that causes a lot of chaos. But it's also very well-meaning, but they're all looking into different people. So it's they're looking into local sex offenders. People are getting tipped in. Some of the tips are really good. Some of the tips are ridiculous. And it's just people trying to stir up stuff because they saw a weird Facebook post. It's just a gamut, and they're running it all down. And they're following up on these leads and these tips. Just basically anything that comes up, they're running it down.
Important to note is that they have this video from one of the girls' phones I played earlier of the man they know is the killer, which is chilling in and of itself. But the public is still unaware of the fact a video even exists. And the sketch generated from the video begins to produce some interesting results.
One of the leads they pursued most seriously for a long period of time involved social media, because they learned that Libby had been in contact with someone via some messaging apps who represented himself as being a wealthy, young, very handsome man. And they had a theory that perhaps this person had tried to arrange a meeting with her. And in fact, Libby had been in contact with this person who referred to himself as Anthony Schatz on the day of the murder itself.
This has got to be the answer, right? Some scumbag, online predator, talking to Libby on the day the girls disappear, and they are then found murdered. If you are law enforcement, you'd have to go all in with this guy.
And police were able to identify Anthony Schatz. He was a man named Kegan Kline, and he lived in the town of Peru, Indiana, which is just a very short drive away from Delphi.
Yeah, and he was a purveyor and collector of child sexual abuse materials. So very, very heinous crime in and of itself.
So they haul in this piece of shit and begin to question him. But there is something nagging at investigators. Klein looks nothing like that sketch of Bridge Guy. I mean, sketches can be a bit wonky and hardly resemble most perpetrators, but this guy and that sketch is, without a doubt, two different people. Which is where this case takes on a life of its own, in a big way. I'll have to end part 1 here. Next week, in part 2, we'll get into how, as they are hot on this sexual deviant, Klein, a really scummy dude who likes kids, and they pursue him with the maximum amount of investigative firepower, Libby and Abby's actual killer is watching the entire thing unfold. A guy who has been, from the very beginning of the case, right there in the thick of the search and the community the entire time. Just a quick thank you for helping me build Crossing the Line. I am grateful for and humbled by your dedication to the show and for helping me spread word about it, which is working. True crime can be done in a tasteful way, and you've provided me with a platform to help spread awareness, cover missing person cases we can help with, and talk about those cases marred by untruths and lies. So I appreciate this from not the bottom, but the center of my heart. Truly, thank you. Head over to patreon.com/MWilliamPhelps and sign up for my free content page, where I'll be interacting with you, doing live streams, posting exclusive content, and dropping a major limited series podcast exclusively for Patreon members. That's patreon.com/MWilliamPhelps. patreon.com/MWilliamPhelps. Always remember, be safe, be aware. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinus, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Music by Epidemic Sound. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.